Boss, I've been reading about historical events lately, and, well, there's something that keeps bothering me. All these huge moments in history. They always seem inevitable when you read about them in textbooks, you know? Like they had to happen exactly the way they did.
That's one of history's greatest illusions, Claire. The sense of inevitability. Let me ask you something. Have you ever stood at a crossroads, literally or figuratively, where a single choice could change everything?
Well, yeah, of course. Everyone has those moments. But we're just ordinary people. I mean, the big stuff in history, wars, revolutions, scientific breakthroughs, that's different, right?
Is it, though? Let me tell you about a moment that changed everything, and it all hinged on one person's decision to cross a river. January 10th, 49 BCE. A Roman general named Julius Caesar stood at the banks of the Rubicon River with his army. Roman law explicitly forbade any general from bringing armed forces across this boundary into Italy. To cross meant civil war. To retreat meant political suicide.
Oh, I've heard that phrase, crossing the Rubicon. But what made Caesar do it? I mean, he had to know the consequences, right?
That's exactly the fascinating part, Claire. Caesar did know. According to the historian Suetonius, Caesar hesitated for hours. He walked along the riverbank, calculating, weighing his options. His advisors argued fiercely. Some urged caution. Return to Gaul, accept exile, live. Others pressed for boldness. March on Rome, seize power, risk everything.
Hours? I always imagined these historical figures as, I don't know, more decisive? More heroic, maybe?
Here's what most people don't realize. Caesar was essentially bankrupt. His political enemies in Rome were planning to prosecute him the moment his governorship ended. He owed massive debts from his campaigns in Gaul. Crossing the Rubicon wasn't just about ambition, it was about survival.
So he was desperate? That makes it feel more human somehow.
Exactly. And when he finally made his choice, Caesar reportedly said, "Alea iacta est," the die is cast. But here's what sends chills down my spine. That single decision didn't just change Caesar's life. It ended the Roman Republic, paved the way for the Roman Empire, and shaped Western civilization for 2 millennia.
Wait. One man's choice did all that? That seems excessive.
Does it? Think about it this way. What if Caesar had turned back? The Roman Republic might have survived. The concept of emperorship might never have emerged. Christianity might have developed differently, or not at all. The entire trajectory of European history would be unrecognizable.
That's terrifying. You're saying all of our modern world basically depends on one guy's bad financial decisions?
Well, it's more complex than that, but you're grasping something profound, Claire. History isn't a predetermined script. It's a series of human choices, each creating ripple effects that compound across centuries. Caesar's crossing triggered a civil war that killed thousands, including his eventual assassination, which led to Augustus becoming the first emperor, which established patterns of autocracy that influenced governance for centuries.
Okay, but surely the big scientific discoveries were different? I mean, someone was bound to figure out that the Earth goes around the sun eventually, right?
Now you're touching on one of my favorite examples, Galileo Galilei. Picture this. The year is 1633. A 69-year-old man, partially blind, kneels before the Roman Inquisition. They're forcing him to recant everything he's spent his life proving, that the Earth moves around the sun.
I know this story, he said. And yet it moves, right after they made him recant, didn't he?
Actually, that's probably a myth. But here's what's not a myth. Galileo's choice to publish his Dialogue Concerning the Two Chief World Systems in 1632. He knew it would anger the Church. Pope Urban VIII had been his friend, his patron. Galileo could have stayed quiet, kept his discoveries to himself, lived comfortably under Church protection.
So why didn't he? Why risk everything?
Because Galileo had looked through his telescope and seen something that shattered 1,000 years of belief. He'd observed the phases of Venus, the moons of Jupiter, the craters on our own moon. The evidence was overwhelming. Copernicus was right. The Earth wasn't the center of the universe.
But people must have known this would upset the church, right? Why was it such a big deal?
Claire, imagine tomorrow scientists announce that everything you believed about reality was wrong. Not just wrong, completely backwards. That's what Copernican theory meant to 17th century Europeans. For over a millennium, humans had seen themselves as the center of God's creation. The Earth was the fixed point around which the heavens revolved.
Oh, so it wasn't just about astronomy. It was about humanity's place in the universe.
Precisely, and Galileo's choice to defend this new understanding publicly didn't just advance science, it fundamentally altered how humans see themselves. It triggered what historians call the scientific revolution, which led to the Enlightenment, which influenced democratic revolutions, which shaped the modern world.
You're doing that thing again, where one person's choice changes everything. It makes me feel so small. Like anything I do could have massive consequences I can't even imagine.
Or it could mean that everything you do matters more than you think. Let me tell you about a decision that perfectly illustrates this. A choice made by a seamstress in Montgomery, Alabama on December 1st, 1955.
Rosa Parks?
The very same. Now, here's what's interesting. Rosa Parks wasn't the first person to refuse to give up her bus seat. Earlier that year, a 15-year-old named Claudette Colvin had done the same thing. But the NAACP decided not to build a campaign around Claudette's case.
Why not?
Several reasons. She was young, unmarried, and pregnant. The civil rights leaders felt she wouldn't be the ideal symbol for their cause. They were waiting for the right person, the right moment. And when Rosa Parks, a respected seamstress and secretary of the local NAACP chapter, made her choice to stay seated, they knew they had found both.
So it wasn't spontaneous? She knew what she was doing?
Rosa Parks later said she wasn't trying to start a revolution. She was just tired. But here's the crucial part. When she made that choice, she set in motion a chain of events that would reshape American society. The Montgomery bus boycott lasted 381 days. It thrust a young minister named Martin Luther King Jr. into the spotlight. It demonstrated that economic pressure could force social change.
And all because one woman decided she'd had enough.
But consider the alternatives, Claire. What if Rosa Parks had moved to the back of the bus that day? What if she'd been too tired, too scared, too concerned about losing her job? The civil rights movement would have happened eventually, but perhaps years later, perhaps led by different people, perhaps with different strategies and outcomes.
This is making me dizzy, boss. Every time you tell me about one of these moments, I think about all the other ways things could have gone. It's like reality is just one possibility out of millions.
Now you're thinking like a historian, Claire. In fact, there's a whole field called counterfactual history, the study of what if. What if Archduke Franz Ferdinand's driver hadn't taken a wrong turn in Sarajevo in 1914?
What are you talking about? Who's Archduke Franz, whatever?
Franz Ferdinand was the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne. On June 28, 1914, he was visiting Sarajevo. A group of Serbian nationalists had planned to assassinate him, but their first attempt failed. The Archduke's motorcade was supposed to leave the city via a predetermined route.
Let me guess, they didn't stick to the route?
The Archduke decided to visit the victims of the first attack in the hospital. His driver took a wrong turn and ended up on the same street where one of the would-be assassins, Gavrilo Princip, was standing. Princip couldn't believe his luck. The target had literally driven right to him.
So he shot the Archduke?
Both the Archduke and his wife. 2 shots that triggered World War I, which killed millions, toppled empires, redrew the map of Europe, and set the stage for World War II.
Hold on. You're telling me that World War I, all those trenches, all that death, all that suffering, happened because a driver took a wrong turn?
At its most basic level, yes. But here's what makes it even more mind-boggling. Princip had actually given up. After the first assassination attempt failed, he was walking to a sandwich shop, dejected, thinking the opportunity was lost forever. The wrong turn literally delivered his target to him.
That's insane. How can something so random have such massive consequences?
Because, Claire, history is built on these moments of contingency. Small choices, Random events, split-second decisions that cascade into world-changing consequences. Historians call these butterfly effects, tiny actions that produce enormous results.
Like that butterfly in Brazil causing a tornado in Texas?
Exactly. Now imagine if Ferdinand's driver had followed the original route. No assassination, probably no World War I, at least not triggered by that event. No Russian Revolution, no rise of Hitler, no Holocaust, no Cold War. The entire 20th century would be unrecognizable.
This is keeping me awake at night, boss. If everything depends on these random moments, how do we make sense of anything? How do we plan for the future?
That's the beautiful paradox of human existence, Claire. We live in a world shaped by chaos and contingency, yet we must act as if our choices matter, because they do. Let me tell you about someone who understood this perfectly, a young patent clerk in Bern, Switzerland, who changed our understanding of reality itself.
Einstein?
Albert Einstein. In 1905, while working at the Swiss Patent Office, he published 4 papers that revolutionized physics. But here's the fascinating part. Einstein almost didn't become a physicist at all. He couldn't get an academic position after graduation. If a friend's father hadn't helped him get that patent office job, he might have remained an obscure high school teacher.
So the theory of relativity happened because of nepotism?
In a way, but consider Einstein's choice. He could have been bitter about his career setbacks. Instead, he used his time at the patent office to think deeply about the fundamental nature of reality. He chose to pursue his intellectual passions despite professional disappointment.
And that changed what exactly?
Everything. Einstein's work on relativity didn't just revolutionize physics. It enabled GPS technology, nuclear energy, modern astronomy, quantum computing. His famous equation E equals mc squared revealed the fundamental relationship between mass and energy, which led to both nuclear power and nuclear weapons.
Wait, so Einstein's work led to nuclear bombs? That must have haunted him.
It did. After Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Einstein called his letter to President Roosevelt, urging the development of atomic weapons the one great mistake of his life. But here's another crucial decision point. In 1939, Einstein had learned that German scientists were working on nuclear fission. He faced a terrible choice: warn the Allies and potentially enable the creation of devastating weapons, or stay silent and risk Nazi Germany developing the bomb first.
What a horrible position to be in. Damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Exactly. And Einstein's choice to warn Roosevelt led to the Manhattan Project, which led to the atomic bombings of Japan, which ended World War II but also ushered in the nuclear age. One physicist's moral anguish shaped the next 70 years of human history.
This is what I mean, boss. How is anyone supposed to make important decisions when you can't predict the consequences? It's paralyzing.
But that's exactly why studying these turning points is so valuable, Claire. Look at someone who faced this uncertainty and handled it brilliantly. Winston Churchill in 1940.
Okay, tell me about Churchill.
Picture this. May 1940. Nazi Germany has conquered most of Europe. The British army has been evacuated from Dunkirk, leaving behind most of their equipment. Hitler controls everything from Norway to France, and the British War Cabinet is seriously considering negotiating peace terms with Germany.
That would have been reasonable, wouldn't it? I mean, they were completely outmatched.
Many thought so. Lord Halifax, the Foreign Secretary, was pushing hard for negotiations. He argued that Britain couldn't possibly fight Germany alone, that seeking terms now might preserve the British Empire, that continuing the war would only lead to invasion and destruction.
So what made Churchill decide to fight on?
Churchill saw something others missed, that negotiating with Hitler would be surrendering not just Britain's independence, but the hope of stopping fascism in Europe. In a cabinet meeting on May 28, 1940, he made a speech that his secretary later called the most important 5 minutes in the history of Western civilization.
What did he say?
He told his cabinet that nations that went down fighting rose again, but those that surrendered tamely were finished forever. He said Britain would fight on, even if it meant fighting alone for months or years, because at least we would go down with honor.
And that convinced them?
That decision to fight on despite seemingly impossible odds, kept Britain in the war long enough for the Soviet Union and the United States to enter the conflict. Without that choice, Hitler might have controlled all of Europe, consolidated his power, and developed technologies that could have made Nazi Germany unbeatable.
So Churchill's decision saved democracy?
In a very real sense, yes, but think about the weight of that choice, Claire. Churchill couldn't know that America would enter the war. He couldn't know that Hitler would make the fatal mistake of invading Russia. He had to make a decision based on principle and hope, not certainty.
That's what I find so terrifying about all these stories, boss. These people had to make huge decisions without knowing what would happen. How did they do it?
That's the essence of leadership, Claire, making critical choices in the face of uncertainty. But here's something that might comfort you. Even ordinary people make decisions that change history. Let me tell you about a Hungarian businessman who saved more lives than almost anyone else in World War II.
I thought you were going to tell me about someone famous.
Raoul Wallenberg was just a businessman from a wealthy Swedish family. In 1944, the US War Refugee Board asked Sweden to send someone to Budapest to help Hungarian Jews escape the Holocaust. Wallenberg could have said no. It was dangerous. He had a comfortable life. It wasn't his responsibility.
But he said yes?
He said yes, and in the space of 6 months, Wallenberg issued thousands of protective passes, sheltered people in buildings he declared Swedish territory, and personally confronted Nazi officials. He saved an estimated 100,000 lives through sheer audacity and moral courage.
What happened to him?
The Soviets arrested him in 1945, and he disappeared into the Gulag system. He sacrificed everything for people he'd never met, simply because he decided that saving lives was more important than personal safety.
That's incredible, but also heartbreaking.
It is, but Wallenberg's story illustrates something crucial, that ordinary individuals, when faced with moral choices, can have extraordinary impact. History isn't just shaped by kings and generals, Claire. It's shaped by teachers, seamstresses, patent clerks and businessmen who choose to act when others remain passive.
Okay, but let's be honest. Most of these stories involve men making decisions. What about women? Did their choices matter in history?
Oh, Claire, that's a perfect question. Let me tell you about a woman whose decision changed the course of scientific history, Marie Curie. In 1891, she faced a choice that seemed mundane but was actually revolutionary.
What kind of choice?
Whether to pursue higher education in Paris. Marie was a brilliant student in Poland, but women couldn't attend university there. She could have accepted this limitation, married, lived a conventional life. Instead, she chose to move to Paris, live in poverty, and study physics and mathematics at the Sorbonne.
That doesn't sound like world-changing decision-making to me.
But it was. That choice led to her discovery of radioactivity, her isolation of radium and polonium, her 2 Nobel Prizes, the first woman to win one, and still the only person to win Nobel Prizes in 2 different sciences. Her work laid the foundation for modern atomic physics, nuclear medicine, and our understanding of matter itself.
Okay, that's pretty impressive. But was it really her decision that mattered? Or would someone else have made these discoveries anyway?
That's the heart of the question, isn't it? The role of individual choice versus historical inevitability. Consider this. Marie Curie's husband Pierre was killed in a tragic accident in 1906. She could have retreated from public life, focused on raising her daughters. Instead, she chose to continue their research, becoming the first female professor at the Sorbonne.
And that mattered because
her continued work during World War I led to mobile X-ray units that saved countless soldiers' lives. Because her research on radioactivity paved the way for cancer treatments. Because her example inspired generations of women to pursue science. Her personal choices rippled through medicine, physics, and social progress.
I'm starting to see the pattern here, boss, but it's making me wonder, do any of these people realize they're making history when they make these choices?
Most of them don't, Claire. Take Stanislav Petrov, a Soviet officer who literally saved the world on September 26, 1983. He was monitoring Soviet early warning systems when computers detected 5 incoming American missiles. Protocol demanded he report the attack, which would have triggered nuclear retaliation.
What did he do?
He chose not to report it. Something felt wrong to him. If America was launching a first strike, why only 5 missiles? Why not hundreds? He decided to trust his instincts over the computers. Later investigation revealed the missiles were actually sunlight reflecting off clouds.
One man's gut feeling prevented nuclear war?
Exactly, Petrov made his choice based on intuition, not grand historical vision. He later said he was just doing his job, but that decision prevented what could have been the end of human civilization. Yet nobody knew about it for decades. It wasn't even classified as a turning point until long after.
That's what I find so unsettling about all this, boss. How many other moments like that have there been? How many times has the world been saved or changed by decisions nobody even remembers?
Countless times, Claire. History is full of invisible turning points. Letters that changed minds, meetings that prevented wars, investments that enabled discoveries. The vast majority of these crucial choices are made by people whose names we'll never know.
So how do we even begin to understand history if so much of it depends on unknown decisions by unknown people?
That's why historians study patterns, Claire. While individual choices are unpredictable, human nature and social forces create recognizable patterns. Let me show you what I mean with one of the most fascinating examples, the fall of the Berlin Wall.
Okay, I know that was a big deal, but wasn't that about politics and economics, not individual choices?
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But the Berlin Wall fell because of a bureaucratic mistake. On November 9, 1989, East German official Günther Schabowski was supposed to announce new, limited travel regulations, but he misread his notes during a press conference and accidentally said the border was open immediately.
He misread his notes?
Completely. The new regulations weren't supposed to take effect for days, and they were meant to be limited and controlled, but Schabowski's mistake was broadcast across East Germany. Thousands of East Berliners rushed to the border crossings, demanding to be let through.
And the guards just let them?
The border guards were as confused as everyone else. They had no instructions for this situation. They called their superiors, but nobody wanted to take responsibility. Finally, overwhelmed guard Harold Jaeger made a choice. Rather than risk a riot, he opened the gates.
So the Berlin Wall fell because of a misread press release and a guard who didn't want trouble.
In the immediate sense, yes. But here's what makes this so fascinating. That moment wouldn't have mattered without the broader context. Mikhail Gorbachev had already decided not to use force to maintain Soviet control. The East German economy was collapsing. People were already fleeing through Hungary and Czechoslovakia.
So the wall was going to fall anyway?
Probably, but maybe not for months or years. And the manner of its fall, peaceful, celebratory, with Germans literally dancing on the rubble, that specific outcome depended on those individual choices by Schabowski and Jaeger. A different scenario might have involved violence, military intervention, a much messier transition.
This is what confuses me, boss. You keep showing me how individual choices matter, but then you say broader forces were already in motion. Which is it?
Both, Claire. That's the beautiful complexity of history. Individual agency operates within structural constraints. People make choices, but those choices are shaped by economics, technology, culture, geography. The art of understanding history is learning to see both levels at once.
Can you give me an example of how that works?
Absolutely. Let's talk about the invention of the printing press by Johannes Gutenberg around 1440. That was clearly an individual innovation. Gutenberg's personal choice to combine existing technologies in a new way.
Okay, that makes sense. One inventor, one breakthrough.
But Gutenberg's innovation was only possible because of broader developments. The spread of papermaking from China, the growth of literacy, the demand for books, advances in metallurgy. His individual genius operated within a context that made his invention both possible and necessary.
So he was bound to invent it?
Not necessarily. Gutenberg faced personal choices throughout the process. He could have given up when his first attempts failed. He could have settled for a less efficient design. His business partner Johann Fust actually sued him and tried to take over the project. Gutenberg could have walked away.
But he didn't.
He didn't. And his choice to persist, to perfect his design, To complete his first printed Bible didn't just create a new technology, it triggered the Renaissance, enabled the Reformation, accelerated the scientific revolution, and laid the foundation for mass literacy.
Wait, all that from a printing press?
Think about it, Claire. Before Gutenberg, books were hand-copied by monks. They were incredibly expensive and rare. Knowledge was controlled by a tiny elite. Gutenberg's press made books affordable and widely available. Ideas could spread rapidly across continents.
And that changed society how?
Luther's 95 Theses launched the Protestant Reformation, partly because they could be printed and distributed throughout Germany in weeks rather than years. Copernicus's astronomical theories spread because scientists could read and debate printed copies of his work. The American Revolution was fueled by printed pamphlets like Tom Paine's Common Sense.
So one man's decision to perfect a printing technique ultimately led to religious reformation, scientific revolution, and democratic revolution.
You're getting it, Claire, but here's what's crucial. None of this was inevitable. Gutenberg could have failed. Luther could have been silenced before his ideas spread. Copernicus could have kept his theories to himself. Each step required individuals to make choices that amplified technological possibilities into social transformation.
This is overwhelming, boss. If individual choices are so important, how can anyone make good decisions? How do you weigh the possible consequences of actions you can't predict?
That's the eternal human dilemma, Claire. But history does offer some guidance. Let me tell you about someone who thought deeply about this problem. Abraham Lincoln during the Civil War.
What choices did Lincoln face?
The biggest one came in 1862. The Civil War was going badly for the Union. European powers were considering recognizing the Confederacy. Lincoln had to decide whether to make the war about slavery or keep it focused on preserving the Union.
Why was that such a difficult choice?
Because making it about slavery would alienate border states that still allowed slavery but had remained in the Union. It might drive them to join the Confederacy. But keeping slavery out of it was increasingly difficult to defend morally, and it wasn't motivating Union soldiers or gaining international support.
So what did he do?
Lincoln chose a middle path that was actually quite brilliant. He issued the Emancipation Proclamation, which freed slaves only in rebellious states. It was limited in scope but transformative in meaning. It reframed the war as a moral crusade while avoiding the immediate political dangers of broader abolition.
And that worked?
It changed everything. European powers, especially Britain, couldn't support the Confederacy once the war was clearly about ending slavery. African Americans could join the Union Army, providing crucial manpower. The moral framework motivated Union supporters and demoralized Confederate sympathizers.
But Lincoln couldn't have known all those consequences when he made the decision, right?
Exactly right, Claire. But Lincoln understood something crucial about decision-making under uncertainty. You can't predict specific outcomes, but you can align your choices with your deepest values and best understanding of the situation.
What do you mean by that?
Lincoln believed slavery was morally wrong, but he also believed preserving the Union was essential. The Emancipation Proclamation honored both values while maintaining strategic flexibility. He made the best decision he could with incomplete information, then adapted as circumstances changed.
That actually sounds like decent advice for regular people too. But I'm still troubled by something, boss. All these examples involve people making choices that seem right in retrospect. What about the terrible decisions, the choices that led to disasters?
Claire, now you're asking about history's dark side. Some of the most important turning points involve catastrophically bad decisions. Take the European powers' choices in July 1914 after Archduke Franz Ferdinand's assassination.
What did they do wrong?
Almost everything. Austria-Hungary chose to use the assassination as an excuse to crush Serbia. Germany chose to give Austria-Hungary a blank check of support. Russia chose to back Serbia. France chose to honor its alliance with Russia. Britain chose to honor its commitment to Belgian neutrality when Germany invaded.
So everyone made the logical choice based on their commitments?
Exactly. Each individual decision seemed rational within its limited context. But collectively, these choices created a chain reaction that nobody wanted, a continental war that killed millions and destroyed 4 empires.
That's terrifying. You're saying that rational people making reasonable decisions can still create absolute disasters?
It's one of history's most sobering lessons, Claire. Good intentions and logical thinking aren't enough if you can't see the bigger picture or understand how your choices interact with others' choices.
So how do you avoid that kind of disaster?
That's where wisdom differs from intelligence, Claire. Intelligence is about solving problems within a given framework. Wisdom is about questioning the framework itself. Let me give you a counterexample. Someone who avoided disaster by thinking outside conventional frameworks.
Who?
John F. Kennedy during the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. When the US discovered Soviet missiles in Cuba, Kennedy's military advisors unanimously recommended immediate airstrikes to destroy them.
That sounds logical. Get rid of the threat.
It was logical, within the framework of Cold War thinking. But Kennedy chose to question that framework. He asked different questions. What if the strikes missed some missiles? What if they killed Soviet personnel? What if this triggered nuclear escalation?
And those questions changed his decision?
Completely. Instead of strikes, Kennedy chose a naval blockade combined with secret negotiations. He offered to remove US missiles from Turkey in exchange for Soviet missiles leaving Cuba. He found a way for both sides to save face while stepping back from nuclear war.
So Kennedy's choice prevented nuclear war?
Many historians believe so, but here's what makes Kennedy's decision-making process so interesting. He deliberately sought out dissenting opinions. He encouraged debate. He questioned assumptions. He tried to understand how his choices would look from the Soviet perspective.
That seems like it should be obvious, but I guess it's not.
Most people, especially leaders, get trapped in their own assumptions and surrounded by advisors who tell them what they want to hear. Kennedy had learned from the Bay of Pigs invasion disaster the year before, where he'd relied too heavily on expert advice without questioning underlying assumptions.
So learning from mistakes made him better at making big decisions?
Exactly. Which brings us to another crucial pattern in history, Claire, how societies and individuals learn from failures. Some of the most important turning points involve people choosing to learn rather than repeat past mistakes.
Can you give me an example?
After World War I, European leaders created the League of Nations to prevent future wars. It failed catastrophically. It couldn't stop World War II. But after World War II, leaders chose to learn from those failures and created different institutions: the United Nations, NATO, the European Union.
And those worked better?
Much better. Despite tensions and conflicts, we haven't had a third world war. Europe went from constant warfare to peaceful integration. The choices made in 1945 to 1950 created the longest period of great power peace in European history.
But those were political leaders making institutional choices. What about scientific discoveries? Do those follow the same patterns?
Absolutely, Claire. Take the discovery of DNA structure by Watson and Crick in 1953. That breakthrough depended on countless individual choices. Rosalind Franklin's choice to use X-ray crystallography, Linus Pauling's choice to pursue the problem despite being excluded from key data, Watson and Crick's choice to build physical models rather than rely purely on mathematical analysis.
Wait, I thought Watson and Crick discovered DNA on their own.
That's the simplified version, but the reality is much more interesting. Franklin's X-ray photographs provided crucial evidence, but she was working separately at a different institution. Pauling was brilliant but was handicapped by having incomplete information due to political restrictions. He couldn't travel freely because of McCarthyism.
So the discovery depended on who had access to what information?
Partly yes, but also on how different people chose to use the information they had. Franklin was methodical and cautious. She wanted more evidence before proposing a structure. Watson and Crick were more willing to speculate and make leaps based on incomplete data.
And their approach worked better?
In this case, yes. But Franklin's caution was also scientifically valid. She might have reached the same conclusion with a bit more time. The race to discover DNA's structure was won by months, not years. Small differences in approach and timing determined who got the credit.
That seems unfair to Franklin.
It was unfair, Claire. Franklin died young and never received the recognition she deserved. Watson and Crick won the Nobel Prize, but Nobel Prizes aren't awarded posthumously, and Franklin had died before they won it. Her story illustrates how social barriers and personal choices intersect to shape scientific history.
This keeps coming back to the same theme, boss. Individual choices matter, but they're constrained by circumstances beyond anyone's control. It's like we're all making decisions in a fog, not knowing what the consequences will be.
That's a beautiful metaphor, Claire, and it leads us to one of the most fascinating aspects of historical turning points: how people navigate that fog. Some rely on intuition, others on careful analysis, still others on moral principles. Let me tell you about someone who combined all three approaches.
Who's that?
Nelson Mandela. In 1985, while imprisoned on Robben Island, he was offered freedom by the South African government on one condition. He had to renounce violence and condemn the African National Congress's armed struggle.
That must have been tempting after decades in prison.
Incredibly tempting. Mandela was 67 years old. He'd been imprisoned for 23 years. His health was failing. His wife Winnie was facing constant harassment. He could have walked out of prison that day.
But he didn't?
He chose to remain in prison rather than compromise his principles. Mandela understood that his personal freedom was meaningless if it came at the cost of his people's liberation. He saw that accepting the government's offer would legitimize apartheid and undermine the struggle for equality.
That must have been an agonizing decision.
It was. But Mandela also understood something crucial about timing and leverage. He recognized that the apartheid government was offering this deal because they were under increasing pressure. International sanctions were working, the economy was struggling, the regime was losing legitimacy.
So his refusal was actually a strategic choice?
Exactly. By staying in prison, Mandela demonstrated that the government couldn't buy off the opposition. His continued imprisonment became a symbol of apartheid's injustice, increasing international pressure on the regime.
And that worked?
5 years later, in 1990, President de Klerk unconditionally released Mandela and began dismantling apartheid. Mandela's choice to suffer longer in order to maintain his principles ultimately led to a much better outcome, not just his freedom, but freedom for all South Africans.
But how could Mandela know that his sacrifice would pay off? What if the government had just ignored him and kept him imprisoned forever?
He couldn't know, Claire. That's the essence of moral courage, acting on principle even when you can't guarantee the outcome. But Mandela had something that guided him through the uncertainty, a clear vision of the kind of society he wanted to create.
What do you mean?
Mandela didn't just want to end apartheid, he wanted to build a multiracial democracy based on reconciliation rather than revenge. That vision shaped all his choices, including his decision to work with his former oppressors rather than seeking to destroy them.
That seems almost superhuman. How do regular people make good decisions when they don't have that kind of moral clarity?
Actually, Claire, most people do have moral clarity about basic issues. They know the difference between right and wrong, fairness and injustice, compassion and cruelty. The challenge is having the courage to act on that knowledge when the stakes are high.
Can you give me an example of ordinary people showing that kind of courage?
Absolutely. Let me tell you about the people of Le Chambon-sur-Lignon, a small village in France during World War II. When the Nazis began deporting Jews, the villagers faced a choice: follow the law and turn in their Jewish neighbors, or break the law and hide them.
What did they do?
The entire village chose to resist. Led by their pastor, André Trocmé, they created an underground network that saved about 5,000 Jewish refugees. They forged documents, created hiding places, smuggled people to safety.
That's incredible. But wasn't that incredibly dangerous?
Extremely dangerous. If caught, they faced imprisonment, torture, execution. Many of them were arrested. Some died. But they kept helping anyway, because they believed it was the right thing to do.
But how did a whole village coordinate something like that? It seems impossible to keep such a big secret.
That's what makes their story so remarkable, Claire. They didn't have elaborate plans or sophisticated organization. They just made individual choices, family by family, day by day, to help people in need. Their collective action emerged from thousands of small, personal decisions.
So you're saying that historical turning points can emerge from ordinary people making ordinary moral choices?
That's exactly what I'm saying. History books focus on famous leaders and dramatic events, but most turning points involve countless unknown people choosing between right and wrong in small, daily decisions.
That's both inspiring and terrifying. It means we all have more responsibility than we might want.
True, but it also means we all have more power than we might realize. Let me show you what I mean with a contemporary example: the fall of the Soviet Union.
I thought that was about economics and politics, not individual choices.
The economic and political problems were real, but the Soviet system might have survived them if not for millions of individual choices by ordinary Soviet citizens. By the 1980s, people simply stopped believing in the system and stopped participating in the lies that held it together.
What do you mean by participating in lies?
The Soviet system required everyone to pretend things were working, to applaud at political rallies, to report optimistic production figures, to denounce dissidents, to act as if they believed the propaganda. When people stopped pretending, the system collapsed.
But that sounds gradual, not like a turning point.
The change was gradual, but there were specific moments when the facade cracked dramatically. Like in 1989, when East German border guards chose to open the Berlin Wall rather than use force, or when Soviet military commanders chose not to intervene when Eastern European governments fell.
So the Soviet Empire collapsed because people chose not to use violence to preserve it?
Largely, yes. At every crucial moment, people in positions of authority chose restraint over repression, reform over reaction. Gorbachev could have used force to maintain control. Military commanders could have staged coups. Secret police could have launched massive crackdowns.
Why didn't they?
Partly because they'd lost faith in the system themselves, but also because they'd learned from history. They'd seen how violent repression in Hungary in 1956 and Czechoslovakia in 1968 had ultimately failed to preserve Soviet control and had only discredited the system further.
So they chose to let the empire fall rather than fight to save it?
In many cases, yes. Which brings us to another crucial pattern in historical turning points. Claire. Sometimes the most important choice is the choice not to act, not to use power when you have it.
That's counterintuitive. Don't we usually think of historical turning points as moments when people take dramatic action?
That's the common perception, but restraint can be just as consequential as action. Consider George Washington's choice after the Revolutionary War. He had enormous power and influence. Many people expected him to become king, or at least president for life.
But he didn't?
He voluntarily gave up power and returned to his farm. That choice established the precedent of peaceful transfer of power that became fundamental to American democracy. King George III reportedly said that if Washington stepped down voluntarily, he would be the greatest man in the world.
So Washington shaped American democracy by choosing not to be a dictator?
Exactly. His restraint was as important as his leadership during the war. It demonstrated that Republican government could work, that leaders could serve the public good rather than their own ambition.
But Washington was exceptional. Can ordinary people really make choices that matter as much as his did?
Let me tell you about Rosa Parks again, but from a different angle. Her choice to stay seated on that bus wasn't just about civil rights. It was about the power of individual conscience against institutional authority.
What do you mean?
Parks could have followed the law, avoided trouble, preserved her comfortable position in the community. Instead, she chose to follow her conscience, even though it meant challenging the entire social order of the South.
And that mattered because
it showed that change was possible. When one person stands up to injustice, it gives others permission to do the same. Parks's choice didn't just trigger the Montgomery bus boycott. It demonstrated that ordinary people could challenge systems that seemed unchangeable.
So individual moral choices can cascade into social movements?
That's exactly right, Claire. And this pattern repeats throughout history. Think about the #MeToo movement. It started with individual women choosing to speak out about harassment and assault, despite personal costs and risks.
And Those individual choices created a movement that changed social attitudes?
Yes, each person who chose to share their story made it easier for others to do the same. Individual acts of courage aggregated into collective social change.
This is starting to make sense, boss. But I'm still puzzled by something. How do we distinguish between choices that will matter historically and choices that won't? Most people make moral stands that nobody remembers.
That's the profound uncertainty of human existence, Claire. We can't know which of our choices will have lasting consequences. But that uncertainty is also liberating. It means we should make decisions based on what we believe is right, not on whether we think they'll make us famous.
But surely some choices are obviously more important than others.
You'd think so, but history is full of surprises. Let me tell you about Alexander Fleming's discovery of penicillin in 1928. Fleming left some bacterial cultures uncovered in his laboratory before going on vacation. When he returned, he found that a mold had contaminated one of the cultures and killed the bacteria around it.
So he discovered penicillin by accident?
The contamination was accidental, but Fleming's choice to investigate it instead of just discarding the culture was deliberate. Many scientists would have simply thrown away the contaminated sample and started over.
And because he chose to investigate, he discovered antibiotics?
He discovered penicillin, but it took over a decade before other scientists figured out how to mass produce it. Fleming's initial discovery might have remained a laboratory curiosity if Howard Florey and Ernst Boris Chain hadn't chosen to pursue it during World War II.
So Fleming's choice to investigate a contaminated sample ultimately saved millions of lives?
Exactly. But Fleming couldn't have known that when he made the choice to look more closely instead of cleaning up and starting over. What seemed like a minor decision in laboratory procedure turned out to be one of the most important medical breakthroughs in history.
That's what I find so unsettling about all these stories, boss. How can anyone make good decisions if you can't predict which choices will matter?
That's the wrong question, Claire. The right question is, how do you make decisions that align with your values and serve the greater good, regardless of whether anyone will remember them?
What do you mean?
Think about all the people we've discussed. Caesar, Galileo, Rosa Parks, Mandela, Fleming. They didn't make their choices because they thought they'd be remembered by history. They made them because those choices reflected who they were and what they believed in.
So you're saying the key is authenticity, not trying to make history?
Exactly. And here's the paradox. People who make authentic choices based on their deepest values are more likely to make decisions that do matter historically, precisely because they're not constrained by conventional thinking or fear of consequences.
Can you give me an example of that?
Absolutely. Think about Greta Thunberg. When she started her school climate strikes in 2018, she was just a teenager with Asperger's syndrome, who was deeply concerned about environmental destruction.
And now, she's internationally famous and has sparked a global movement.
Right, but she didn't start striking because she wanted to be famous. She started because she felt she had to act on her convictions, even if nobody paid attention. Her authenticity and moral clarity are what made her message powerful.
So authenticity is more effective than calculation?
Often, yes. People can sense when someone is speaking from genuine conviction versus when they're trying to manipulate opinion or gain advantage. Authentic moral choices often have more impact than strategic ones.
But surely strategy matters too. You can't just follow your heart and ignore consequences entirely.
You're absolutely right, Claire. The most effective historical figures combine moral authenticity with strategic thinking. Let me give you a perfect example. Martin Luther King Jr.'s approach to civil rights.
How did he combine those two things?
King was deeply committed to nonviolence as a moral principle. That was his authentic conviction. But he also understood that nonviolent resistance was strategically brilliant in the context of 1960s America.
How so?
Because it forced opponents to reveal their true nature. When peaceful protesters were attacked by police dogs and fire hoses, television cameras captured the violence. Americans watching at home could see clearly who was behaving morally and who wasn't.
So King's moral convictions happened to align with effective strategy?
It wasn't coincidence, Claire. King studied Gandhi's methods in India and understood how nonviolent resistance could work in different contexts. He chose nonviolence because he believed it was right, but he also understood how to make it effective.
That sounds like the perfect combination, doing what's right in a way that actually works.
Exactly. And that brings us to one of the most important lessons about decision-making at historical turning points. The most effective choices often emerge from the intersection of moral conviction and practical wisdom.
Can you show me how that works in other historical examples?
Certainly. Consider Abraham Lincoln again. His moral conviction was that slavery was wrong, but his practical wisdom told him that ending slavery too quickly might destroy the Union and ultimately harm the cause of freedom.
So the Emancipation Proclamation was a compromise between his ideals and political reality?
It was a strategic application of his ideals. Lincoln found a way to advance the cause of freedom while maintaining the political coalition necessary to win the war and preserve the Union.
And that worked better than a purely idealistic approach would have?
Almost certainly. If Lincoln had tried to abolish slavery immediately upon taking office, the border states would have joined the Confederacy, making Union victory much less likely. His strategic patience ultimately served his moral goals.
So sometimes you have to be patient with your ideals?
Sometimes, yes. But the key is never abandoning those ideals, just being smart about how and when you pursue them. Lincoln never wavered in his belief that slavery was wrong. He just chose his timing and methods carefully.
This is really helpful, boss. But I'm curious about something else. Do these patterns work differently in different cultures? Are there universal principles for good decision-making, or does it depend on context?
That's a sophisticated question, Claire. Let me tell you about someone who faced this challenge directly, Mohandas Gandhi, when he returned to India from South Africa in 1915.
What challenge did he face?
Gandhi had developed his methods of non-violent resistance in South Africa, where he was fighting specific laws affecting Indian immigrants. But India was completely different, a vast, diverse country under colonial rule, with complex religious and social divisions.
So he had to adapt his approach?
Exactly. Gandhi could have tried to impose the South African model on India, but instead he spent his first few years traveling around the country, listening, learning, understanding local conditions and concerns.
And that changed his strategy?
It transformed it. Gandhi realized that Indian independence couldn't just be about political freedom. It had to address economic inequality, social injustice, and cultural renewal. He developed new methods like the Salt March that resonated specifically with Indian conditions and values.
So the same moral principles worked, but the specific methods had to be different?
Right, Gandhi's commitment to nonviolence and truth remained constant, but his application of those principles evolved based on local context. He understood that effective moral leadership requires cultural sensitivity and adaptation.
That makes sense. But how do you know when you're adapting wisely versus compromising your principles?
That's one of the hardest questions in ethics and leadership, Claire. Gandhi's answer was to maintain core principles while remaining flexible about methods. He never abandoned nonviolence, but he experimented constantly with different forms of resistance.
And that worked?
It led to Indian independence in 1947, though not without terrible costs. The partition of India and Pakistan led to massive violence and displacement. Even Gandhi's success was mixed and complicated.
So even the best decisions have unintended consequences?
Almost always, Claire. That's why humility is so important in decision-making. Even the wisest choices can produce outcomes you never anticipated.
That's both sobering and oddly comforting. It means nobody can expect to control everything, even the people who make historically important decisions.
Exactly. And that brings us to another crucial insight about turning points in history. They often emerge from the interaction between human choices and forces beyond anyone's control.
What do you mean by forces beyond control?
Technology, climate, disease, demographic changes, economic cycles. Consider how the Black Death in the 14th century created the conditions that ended feudalism in Europe.
A disease ended feudalism?
The plague killed about a third of Europe's population, creating massive labor shortages. Suddenly, surviving peasants could demand higher wages and better working conditions. Lords who had relied on cheap labor were forced to offer incentives to keep workers.
So the plague accidentally created social mobility?
In a sense, yes. But the transition from feudalism to more modern economic relationships also required countless individual choices. Peasants choosing to demand better terms, lords choosing to negotiate rather than use force, merchants choosing to invest in new forms of production.
So historical turning points happen when external circumstances create opportunities that people choose to seize?
That's a good way to put it, Claire. Circumstances create possibilities, but human choices determine which possibilities become realities.
Can you give me a more recent example?
Absolutely. The development of the internet, the underlying technology emerged from military and academic research, but its transformation into a global communication network required millions of people choosing to adopt, adapt, and expand it.
I never thought of the internet as depending on individual choices.
But it did. Researchers chose to share protocols freely rather than patenting them. Entrepreneurs chose to invest in infrastructure. Governments chose to allow civilian access. Users chose to create content and communities.
And now it's transformed how humans communicate and organize society.
Exactly. But none of the early developers could have predicted social media, e-commerce, or online education. They made choices based on their immediate goals and values, not on a grand vision of digital transformation.
This keeps coming back to the same theme. People making the best choices they can with limited information, and those choices having consequences they never anticipated.
That's the human condition, Claire. We make decisions in uncertainty and live with the results. But here's what I find inspiring about studying these turning points. Even in uncertainty, people can make choices that serve truth, justice, and human flourishing.
How do they do that? How do you make good choices when you can't predict the consequences?
By focusing on what you can control, your intentions, your methods, your commitment to your deepest values. Let me give you one more example that illustrates this perfectly.
I'm listening.
In 1955, a young seamstress named Rosa Parks faced a simple choice: give up her bus seat or refuse. She couldn't know that her choice would launch the Montgomery bus boycott, thrust Martin Luther King Jr. into prominence, or help transform American race relations.
But you told me that story already, boss.
Yes, but think about it from Parks's perspective in that moment. She was tired after a long day of work. She was sitting in the colored section of the bus. The bus driver ordered her to give up her seat so a white passenger could sit down.
And she said no.
She said no. Not because she planned to make history, but because she was tired of giving in to injustice. Her choice was based on personal dignity and moral conviction, not strategic calculation.
But that's what made it powerful?
Exactly, Claire. Parks's authenticity, her willingness to accept consequences for her convictions, her simple human dignity in the face of injustice, that's what inspired others to action.
So the key to making good decisions is to focus on being authentic and moral, rather than trying to control outcomes?
That's beautifully put, Claire. And here's the profound truth. When people make authentic choices based on their deepest values, they're more likely to make decisions that serve the greater good, even if they can't predict exactly how.
But what about people who make authentic choices based on terrible values? History is full of people who were sincere in their beliefs, but caused enormous harm.
You're absolutely right, Claire. Authenticity alone isn't enough. It has to be combined with wisdom, compassion, and respect for human dignity. Hitler was authentic in his beliefs, but those beliefs were based on hatred and delusion.
So how do you distinguish between good authenticity and bad authenticity?
That's where education, reflection, and moral development become crucial. The more we understand history, human nature, and the consequences of different approaches, the better equipped we are to make choices that serve human flourishing rather than destruction.
And studying these historical turning points helps with that?
Absolutely. By understanding how past choices led to different outcomes, we can develop better judgment about our own decisions. We learn to recognize patterns, anticipate unintended consequences, and align our choices with values that have proven beneficial over time.
That makes sense. But I have one more question, boss. If individual choices matter so much, what does that mean for us today? What choices are we making right now that might be historical turning points?
That's the most important question of all, Claire. We're living through several potential turning points right now. Climate change, artificial intelligence, global inequality, the future of democracy. The choices we make about these issues will shape the world our children inherit.
But those seem like such enormous problems. How can individual choices matter when the challenges are so big?
The same way they've always mattered, Claire, through aggregation, inspiration, and the power of moral example. Consider climate change. It requires both individual choices about consumption and lifestyle, and collective choices about policy and investment.
So we need both personal responsibility and political action.
Exactly. And here's what history teaches us. Social movements that create lasting change usually combine both. Personal transformation and political transformation reinforce each other.
Can you give me a contemporary example?
Look at how attitudes toward LGBTQ rights have changed over the past few decades. It happened through millions of individual choices. People choosing to come out to family and friends, others choosing to listen and learn, activists choosing to organize, politicians choosing to evolve their positions.
And those individual choices aggregated into social change?
Rapid, dramatic social change. In many countries, same-sex marriage went from unthinkable to legal within a single generation. That kind of transformation requires both personal courage and strategic political action.
So we're all potentially making history right now with our daily choices?
You are, Claire. Every choice you make about how to treat other people, how to respond to injustice, how to use your talents and resources, these choices matter. They shape the world around you and contribute to larger patterns of change.
That's both inspiring and overwhelming.
I understand the feeling. But remember, you don't have to save the world single-handedly. You just have to make the best choices you can with the information and opportunities you have.
And trust that those choices, combined with others' choices, will lead to good outcomes?
Not exactly trust. Hope and work. Hope that your choices will contribute to positive change, and work to make that hope a reality by continuing to choose wisely, learning from mistakes, and supporting others who are making similar efforts.
That actually sounds manageable. Focus on making good choices rather than trying to control history.
Precisely, Claire. And here's the beautiful thing. When you focus on making authentic, compassionate choices rather than trying to control outcomes, you often have more positive impact than if you'd tried to manipulate events.
Why is that?
Because authenticity is persuasive. When people see you acting from genuine conviction rather than self-interest, they're more likely to trust your judgment and follow your example. Moral authority comes from moral consistency.
Like Gandhi or King or Mandela.
Exactly like them. They had enormous influence not because they sought power, but because they lived their values consistently, even when it cost them personally.
So the most effective way to change the world is to focus on changing yourself?
That's part of it, yes. But it's also about using your personal transformation to serve others and work for justice. Individual growth without social engagement is self-indulgent. Social engagement without personal growth is often ineffective.
You need both inner work and outer work.
That's beautifully put, Claire. The most influential people in history have typically combined deep personal reflection with committed social action.
This conversation has been incredible, boss. I feel like I understand history so much better now. It's not just about memorizing dates and names. It's about understanding how human choices create the world we live in.
And more importantly, how your choices are creating the world your children will live in. You're not just studying history, Claire, you're making it.
That's a sobering thought, but also empowering. It means my life actually matters, not just to me, but to the larger human story.
Your life matters enormously, Claire. Every life does. That's perhaps the most important lesson from studying these turning points. History is made by human beings making human choices. There's nothing inevitable about how things turn out.
And that means there's always hope for positive change?
Always. As long as people are willing to make courageous, compassionate choices, positive change remains possible. The future is not predetermined. It's created by the choices we make today.
Thank you, boss. This has changed how I think about everything. My own life, current events, the future. I feel like I have a responsibility I didn't fully understand before.
And that responsibility is also a privilege, Claire. You get to participate in the ongoing creation of human civilization. You get to choose what kind of world you'll help bring into being.
I won't take that lightly.
I know you won't. And remember, you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be thoughtful, authentic, and committed to learning and growing. The people who've shaped history for the better weren't perfect either. They were just human beings trying to do their best.
Like all of us.
Like all of us, Claire. And that's both the challenge and the hope of human existence. That ordinary people, making thoughtful choices with good intentions, can create extraordinary change.
Here's to making choices that matter then.
Here's to making choices that matter. And remember, you're already making them. Every day, in ways both small and large, you're helping to write the next chapter of the human story.
I'll remember that, boss. Thank you for helping me see that history isn't something that happens to us. It's something we create together, one choice at a time.
That's exactly right, Claire, and with that understanding, you're better equipped to face whatever turning points lie ahead in your own life and in our shared future.
I feel ready for whatever comes next.
I believe you are, Claire. And I believe the choices you make will be part of the solution to whatever challenges humanity faces going forward.
That's both humbling and inspiring.
The best insights usually are, Claire. The best insights usually are.
Oh, well, it's getting late. I suppose it's time for me to head home. Oh no. I forgot my wallet again. What a blunder. Excuse me, you over there? Yes, you. I'm terribly sorry. I actually left my wallet at home. I know this is a lot to ask, but would you mind covering my ginger ale? Is it okay? You've been listening to our conversation for a while now, haven't you? I know you have. Did you enjoy it? If you found it even a little helpful, please, you can support me via the QR code at the bottom right of the video or through the link in the description. Thank you so much for your kindness. I really appreciate your support. If you'd like, please also subscribe to the channel, give us a like, and leave a comment. Also, please take a look at the other channels from the link in the description. All right then. I'm heading home now. Thank you so much.